We on? All right, it's 6 o'clock. Linda, could you please give the invocation?
Okay, let us bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, I just thank you and praise you for who you are. I thank you for these people that are sitting here. I thank you for this city, and I thank you for the way that you intervene in our city government. I thank you, Father, for the accomplishments that were done in the past year. And I thank you, God, for this new year. I thank you that your plans for us are for good and not for evil, to prosper us and give us a future and a hope. Father, your word says that some men find their strength in their weapons and wisdom, but our miracle deliverance can never be won by men. Our boast is in the Lord, our God, who makes us strong and gives us victory. You also say that there is a way that seems right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. So, Father, let us follow your ways here tonight. Your thoughts are higher than our thoughts, and your ways are higher than our ways. I thank you, God, and I speak prosperity over this city in the next year. Father, and I thank you, Lord Jesus, that you are awakening our eyes and our ears and our hearts to hear and to see you, that we may prosper and make this Freeport truly a place of freedom and one of the best cities to live in this nation. In Jesus' holy name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Linda. Now we'll officially call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll?
Mayor Miller,
Here.
Alderpersons Borneman,
Here.
McClanathan,
Here.
Ross,
Here.
Parker,
Here.
Busker,
Here.
Brashaw, Misick,
Here.
and Berberay.
Here.
Thank you. And could you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Alderman Ross? And Alderman Ross, the meeting is yours.
Next is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. We have a first approval made by Alderman Bradshaw, second by Alderman Misick. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Next is approval of the COW from November 12, 2019. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second that.
Motion made by Busker, seconded by Misick. All those. Berberay. Excuse me. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Public comments. There are none at this time. Next discussion of ordinance 290, compensation and benefits section 290.11, leave of absence. Manager Crowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in reviewing the compensation benefits as we were going through the union contracts, we discovered there are some inconsistencies as we've reorganized the departments within the ordinance that was passed in 2015. Roxanne and I reviewed these, and we've also had both chiefs involved in it. One of the things the ordinance did was allowed the police chief, fire chief to set their standards as it relates to what the union personnel were doing in accordance with as we move forward and the shifts they were doing. One of our proposals is to bring the non-union, non-shift personnel down to 200 hours to meet what we're doing across the board and other with ASME and all the other non-union. I gave you passed out or sent to you the sheets that showed who this would affect. Right now, it would affect Matt, the police chief, and it would affect one of the lieutenants. It would bring him down. We're also already bringing down Blair Seneff. He is coming down as he made the promotion to an 8-hour shift. It more aligns since they're being accounted for in an 8-hour shift, this would more align their vacation. We did make an additional proposal in here, and after some discussion with some council members, this was an effective, one of the things we had talked about was giving the non-bargaining employees who had accrued over 160 hours the ability to sell back 40 hours of vacation once a year. After further discussion, when some concerns were raised by some council members, we are going to, the recommendation from Roxanne and I is to withdraw this and look at other options as we move forward in this. We do have, one of the things we were trying to address is that right now 4 of your department heads and myself all have 200 hours of vacation because they're not being, while they can take the time, their focus is on getting this, working with the city and getting things done right here. And this was to encourage, this was originally proposed to encourage them to take a week of leave, week of vacation, and then sell back an additional 40 hours to help fund that vacation. With that, I am open to questions, concerns that you may have, and so we can go forward and make modifications.
Question, Chair?
Alderman Parker.
Yes. You're cutting them down to 200. What were they allowed to have prior to that?
So, 302.
302. So
I think that's correct, right, Matt?
it seems like they've done nothing, and all of a sudden we're taking away something they've earned. And
Well, no, we're not taking away because they'll be given up to a year to use that.
to use it down to 200 hours.
Or we can never, and we have to buy back. If they don't use it, then we have to buy it back.
Okay. Thank you.
Chair?
Alderman McLennan there.
The one in regards to the police said the lesser of 2 years accrual or 302 hours. Are you saying the 302 was the lesser of those numbers?
No, 302 hours is what they're both that the 3 lieutenants you currently have in the police department, the deputy chief and the chief can all accrue up to that point. The union, if they came in after the modification of the last contract, not this contract, the previous contract, if they came in, could accrue up to 256. Everybody that was on the police department prior to that time can accrue 302 hours.
Follow-up, Chair?
Yes.
Looking at the fire department one, it differentiated, and I think this was some of the intent back in the day of having some of the leeway, I guess, with the authority, but it referenced those who were working 24-hour shifts and those who were working 8-hour shifts. Do we have anybody, and obviously this excludes collective bargaining agreements and individuals, so do we have anybody outside of collective bargaining that, under the current structure with fire, is working in excess of the 8-hour shifts?
We have 3 district chiefs that are working 24-hour shifts.
Okay.
And if you remember our agreement with the district chiefs that the council passed 2 years ago, or 18 months ago, they accrue at the same rate that the union contract does for vacation time. The letter that we signed with them.
Follow-up, Chair?
Go right ahead.
Thank you. So what would this look like, practically speaking, talk to me about how this would actually look like for the district chiefs with the 200 hours, 24-hour shifts. How does that play out compared to everybody else?
So the district chiefs, well, this does not, district chiefs will still earn, this does not affect the district chiefs. If you look at, it says any employee reason promotion bargaining, the rank of deputy chief or higher as its vacation bank in excess of 200 hours. So the district chiefs will continue to earn their vacation at the same rate that the union is. Just as the sergeants who are non-union and are on 12-hour shifts will earn it at the rate in which the unions do, which is 300, they earn it 302 hours, correct?
And that was the same rationale behind doing the rank of lieutenant or higher on the police side. So
That's
we're-
correct.
We're dealing with the upper level of management on it, which is why we only saw those certain individuals on the sheet that you sent out. Okay, I got it now, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Alderman Bradshaw.
Thank you. Manager Crowe, I was reading the memo you sent to us, and it says the estimated cost to the city on a yearly basis if all eligible members took advantage of this is about $21,500.
That's if they take advantage of the buyback, the 40-hour buyback, and that's based upon what we've done for the numbers, running the numbers for the non-union personnel that can be afforded this. As we go forward, the concern, and Roxanne and I did, that had been raised, is if we put it in here, is this give another thing that can be bargained into the contract?
Thank you.
Well, do you have any further discussion?
Chair.
Alderman McClanathan.
All right, so how do we reconcile paragraph C with paragraphs A and B? And what I'm specifically looking at is the payout provisions of A and B, and then the what looks like is not being taken out on C, which had set a cap, and then said if anybody was in excess, they don't lose it, but they don't accrue anymore until after they come down below the 200. How are we going to marry the two of these, council?
That's a good question, and I did talk to Roxanne about this. So I think we need a little bit of tweaking to this to account for an additional scenario, which is those people that are not being promoted, like a non-promotion situation where you might have a supervisory role of the individual who has over the 200 hours. So do we want to allow, in that scenario, where it's not a promotion, but you have over the 200 hours, a similar structure where you can either use it within a 12-month period, or then you have to, or otherwise it would be bought back at the end of that 12-month period too. We hadn't worked that language into this paragraph C, but it would seem to make sense to do that if that's the desire of the council, to stay consistent with the other two, paragraph A and paragraph B.
And so the council's aware, the paragraph C is a paragraph that was in the original ordinance that was passed. We did not modify that as it was, so.
Mr. Chair.
Alderman Bradshaw.
Thank you. Manager Crowe, we're going to readdress some of these changes before it moves forward.
We
Is
will.
that what you're proposing? And in no way, shape, or form, this is really not supposed to hurt the employee. If they just accumulate more, they just get paid off for those hours, correct?
So this will limit the accrual once we get everybody down to 200 hours. This will limit the deputy chiefs, and the deputy chiefs were already going to 200 hours. We have only one deputy chief that was promoted in this last year that had over 200 hours. He was in the process of using that down anyway. He wasn't accruing anymore. So he was using that down. So there are three people that would be affected by this, or two actually right now, by this ordinance. It would affect 4 people overall on the police side, but only 2 of them are above the 200 hours.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Alderman Bradshaw.
Thank you. Manager Crowe, I do realize that you are the CEO and the boss of the chiefs and, of course, their staff. But have you had any feedback from any of them on this, negative or positive?
Both of them reviewed it. Matt was concerned about the impact to his guys. Our concern is this, as we go forward, we're trying to standardize all the non-union as we go into this. Matt did express concerns with me. We had 4 conversations over dealing with this. His concern was is the non-union are getting, the union are getting more benefits than the non-union. Again,
I see. And then Chief Leggett, how has that affected this gentleman?
Chief looked at it and said, hey, we're already correcting this. We're already have adopted this 200 hours is going forward.
We're already doing it.
Okay. Thank you for that input.
Chair. Just to help me understand this, the purpose of this, is this to make those in the non-union fire and police employees equal to all non-union city employees?
That's correct.
So if I can have some follow-up questions.
Yep, go right ahead.
So with that being said, this is, as of now, the fire and police non-union, some of them were able to earn more vacation hours than other city employees who didn't work in that department?
That's, they were able to earn up to 302 hours of vacation time. And one of the discussions that we had is, so they're working on an 8-hour shift. So they were originally able to get up to 302 hours because they were working a 12-hour shift as a sergeant. What happened was the way the ordinance was written was that the chief had the ability to take his non-union personnel and allow them to, even though they're working on an 8-hour shift, to earn up to a 12-hour shift level of 302 hours.
Okay. And then just to follow up for council here, if this has been going, if let's say you have an employee who's been working for the department or one of these departments for over a decade and they've been allowed to accrue this type of thing, do you have any concerns of this becoming like an implied in fact contract or something along those lines where when we change this we could see litigation?
I don't think that's going to be an issue, because ultimately, at the end of the day, you're not taking it away from them. They're not going to lose it per se, in the sense that, they're either going to get to use the time or that it's going to get paid out to them. So it's not like we're taking money out of their pocket per se of time that they had already, vacation time they had already earned. I don't think, and likewise, I don't think they're guaranteed that format was going to continue in perpetuity. So.
Okay. I guess my thing was more of the ability to accrue more than 200 hours would be the thing that they would complain over, not necessarily being paid out. That would be the thing I would be concerned about. Is that you don't have a problem with that or don't see an issue with that?
Not at this time.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair.
Alderman Bradshaw.
Thank you. Manager Crowe, I'm not sure if I understood. Why would an employee want to accumulate more than 200 hours of vacation pay, for one thing? I mean, that seems like a lot of vacation time to save up for.
So our union personnel on the police side and the fire side accrue more vacation time based upon, so what they're accruing is the 256 hours is the equivalent of, because they're working 12-hour shifts, the equivalent is if they're working 8-hour shifts. So so you get 12 hours because you're covering your shifts. So you get the same number of days off, but it's 12 hours versus 8 hours. So everybody else in the city is based upon an 8-hour day, and that's what they earn vacation at. The same thing with fire. Fire works on a 24-hour shift on every third day. So they earn vacation according to that. So that's, when they earn it, they're earning it up over so they get 5 weeks, the ability to earn up to 5 weeks and keep that 5 weeks vacation. So what in essence you're doing is you're saying that the way it's set up right now is the 4 officers, or the 5 officers in the police department, they take their vacation at 8-hour increments back when they're over, so they actually get more than, they get 7 weeks of vacation once they become non-union and move to the 8-hour shift, because they're still being, so because of they were earning at that 12-hour shift, so they could keep that up to their 5 weeks. Now that converts over and allows them, they can continue right now, they can continue to earn the 302 hours. Now, Matt and Andy Schroeder, they don't take a lot of vacation. So that's why they have 302 hours on the books.
Chair?
Yep, Alderman Kennedy.
Would paying out the excess at this time and having that lower threshold limit our pension liability exposure at the end of an employee's?
I don't think the vacation does not apply, move into pension liability.
Right, their normal vacation is pensionable, but this is a one-time type payment, so it would not be pensionable.
Understood, but you said their normal one does go to it. So if we leave this in place at the higher threshold, somebody who retires down the road at this higher threshold is going to have more of a liability for the long-term liability for the city?
When they retire, they'll be paid out.
Sure.
And it won't be part of their pension because it's an extra pay.
Okay. So the extra pay for the vacation doesn't go into their, it's just extra payment at the end of their term at whatever their rate was when they retired versus maybe whatever the rate is now.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And one last thing, Chair, if I could.
Yep, go ahead.
So on the police, we're excluding the sergeants, because are the sergeants 12-hour shifts right now?
Most of them.
Most of them are 12-hour
There's one that is
shifts?
not.
Okay. And that's why we're excluding them? Disparity?
That's correct.
And the district chiefs are the only ones on here that are the 24 out of?
Yes,
Okay,
that's correct.
all right. So it's really, you really attempted to make it kind of apples to apples in regards to the hours and hours on here?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Parker.
You've said you talked to the department heads. Have we talked to the lieutenants or the firemen that it affects?
I'm not gonna go, that's their responsibility to talk to their lieutenants, and I'm not gonna go down to their,
Do I put them on the spot here in front of you right now? I'm not gonna put them on the spot, forget it.
Don,
Drop it.
Chair,
Alderman Bordeman.
I would like to ask Chief Summers just kind of a hypothetical, if that's all right. I know when an employee goes from bargaining to a non-bargaining in a promotion scenario, it is fair to say I think you could argue they lose a lot of benefits.
There is a disparity that we're working on between the union and the non-union.
Was the ability to have this amount of vacation one of the incentives to seek that? One of the incentives you had from leaving the union to a authority or a supervisory position, or do you not think that's an issue?
I don't think it's an incentive per se. It's more of an equity thing to stay equal to what the union was.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any more discussion involving compensation benefits? If not,
Well, Chair, then, we need to decide what we want to do with it, I guess, for tonight, in regards to, Manager Crowe had already indicated there'd be some revisions for us. I'd kind of like to see the revised version, unless the majority of the council said they didn't want to discuss this any further, but I haven't heard that either. So I would ask that, we have a revised, well, I don't know whether you want to add another cow or the next council meeting, but I'd ask for that we move this to the next council meeting to have, to see a revised version for our deliberation. And if we don't like how it stands, we can move it on to the next cow or take other action as applicable.
And I'll second that if that's needed.
okay. We're gonna, would be a motion?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we had a motion made by Alderman McClanahan, seconded by Alderman Bordeman to move this to the next COW meeting, correct?
Next regularly scheduled council meeting
Okay,
with revisions brought back by staff pursuant to discussions tonight.
Alderman McClanahan would like to have brought back to the next council meeting with the revised versions brought in that night.
That's correct.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah. Opposed? Ordinance, it passed. Okay. The next discussion is a Cypress Solution GIS tracking of the snow plows and leaf removal vehicles. Director Carr and Director Sutman.
Thank you, Council. If you're like me in the government space, the government sphere, you hear a lot about smart cities. It can be tough to get a tangible example of what that means. Tonight we're going to look at a tangible example, and it's snowplow tracking. This is a proposal that we received from Cypress View. They're a partner with US Cellular, and we'll take a look. Our current fleet of snowplows, 16 plows. Part of the solution also gets into leaf pickup. So we've included, there's also 4 leaf vacuum units. So how does it all work? They'll take the snowplows, install a GPS antenna, a wireless modem router, and several sensors on a snowplow. And that feeds data back to City Hall, or more accurately to the cloud. Statistics like speed, direction, GPS location, whether the plow is up and down, and when we get some newer hardware in-house, how much salt's being thrown. All that feeds back into what's called the View software. It's an asset tracking software that delivers a lot of analytical data and a map to city staff. One of the things we're pretty excited about is the potential cost savings. This year, our salt budget's $150,000. And speaking with some state Department of Transportation directors, they gave me a pretty good idea that 10% is a pretty good expectation on savings. So that comes out to about $15,000 a year. I listed the insurance claim information. That one isn't really something that would be a definite savings, because if we were at fault, but if we weren't, it would prove whether we were where we were and when. This one leads into the next one. So kind of the wrap up is, once the expected salt savings are realized, I projected a 2-year return on investment. The reason I say when they're realized is right now we have hydraulic salt spreaders. To get the true realized savings, we'd have to get some electronic salt spreaders to get the real accurate data on how much salt's being used, with the expectation that maybe we're over-salting in some areas, so we could save on salt. The hardware that actually goes in the snowplows and the leaf machines is $17,000. Annual software and hardware support costs, $28,000. And then we've got a few other software and wireless data costs. And again, the expected savings, once fully realized, is about $15,000. There's some non-financial value. Just making sure we get it doesn't happen often, but making sure we get every road plowed in town. What this will give us, I think it was on this one. In the lower right, what staff will see is kind of like they call it a breadcrumb map. And potentially the public down the road. But wherever the plows go, it shows little dots. So we know exactly where the plows have gone during the snow event. Another potential is by viewing that breadcrumb map, we could maybe increase some efficiencies on the routes that the plows take, to make sure there's not a great deal of backtracking. And then the addition of, they're gonna allow us to have get in on their pilot program for little Bluetooth sensors for the leaf vac machines. And that's it. Any questions?
Any discussion from the council?
Mr. Chair.
Alderman Bradshaw.
Thank you. Kurt, I noticed that you also have the sensors available for the leaf pickup trucks, and that way you can monitor too where and when they are on any specific day and whether or not they made a certain run on any specific street, is that correct?
What we were told is it'll only give location. We're trying to figure out a way to see if the blower's actually on and operational. But I think we felt pretty good that if it's on that road going pretty slow, that they're picking up the leaves. So yes, it'd be used for leaf pickup too.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Alderman Meister.
So the estimates given in the presentation, is that all inclusive? Are there any more add-ons such as the electronic salt spreading? Is that covered as well?
It is not. I tried to get a price on that today, and the vendor didn't get back to me. And there'd be fairly incidental costs of maybe some hydraulic T connectors that measure the plow up, plow down functions. Do you know what those run about?
The electronic spreaders?
That and the T's.
So the T's were pretty insignificant in the grand scheme of things. But switching them from hydraulic to electronic is a fairly expensive, that I don't think we would want to take on some of the trucks we've got. I think we'd leave them as hydraulic. It will sense whether we're salting or not. We also have the ability to lock control so they can only throw a certain amount, but I don't know if that's necessarily where we want to go with the salt spreading. But this will at least give us where the plows have been, if the plows are up or down, whether we're salting. I kind of see it as a benefit of that way we don't salt the same street twice. We've got a lot of plows that leave Island and head down similar roads to get to the separate plow areas, and knowing if they're throwing salt or if they've got their plows up or down can kind of help us with some of that spread out.
Follow up?
Yeah,
So
Alderman Meister.
does the software allow real-time tracking for the driver?
It is real time. I mean, if we put tablets with all the drivers, they'd be able to see where they're at. That's also another item that's in the truck that could be pulling their attention. I mean, when they're out plowing, if they're not accustomed to having another heads-up screen, sometimes that can add more liability to a driver than if they had started in a plow truck with a screen and went from there.
Alderman Burberry.
Kurt, has this been proven technology in what other types of communities around here, or?
There are a couple communities our size that are doing it, not a lot, but it's especially been proven with State Department of Transportation's plowing highways.
So one of the things we got this started talking is both Dennis and I have seen demonstrations of this technology. Demonstrations of this technology at our national conferences, how communities have actually used it on their website so the residents can see in real time where they're at, plus track where roads may have been missed for plowing or leaf pickup.
Thank you. Follow-up?
Yes.
Are the sensors, are they protected from the elements? Because if we get a couple feet of snow out there and they're throwing that stuff all over, is it secure that it'll continue to work even during extremely bad weather, which it ought to be working?
So the sensors are inside the cab. The hydraulic ones run inside the hydraulic valve or in the box itself, so it's extremely protected.
Okay.
The electronic ones are right onto the back of the electronic box itself.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Alderman Meister.
So Manager Crow, you mentioned that this has been discussed in other meetings. Is the 10% savings in cost, has that been realized? And if so, I imagine we'd have less environmental impact as well, using less salt?
So they did not discuss in the meetings I was at the savings. That came from the contractor and the other unit, the other communities you talked to, that Kurt talked to as we went forward. What I looked at was the ability to track, so we get calls on a regular basis as to where's the snow plows at, what are we doing, where are they gonna do, and that was really that and leaf pickup when we've had issues. Dennis and I, when we first got here 2 years ago, had issues where small one-section streets where leaves were being missed, and that's where we actually started this discussion internally into the staff 2 years ago as to how to look at some of these processes, and larger communities use it very extensively so they can track and tell their citizens where they're plowing.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Alderman Isaac.
On average, I imagine this would change on different snowfalls. Are there many calls of residents on streets that are missed and plows being redirected as a result? Is that a regular occurrence on a snowfall?
Most of the calls we get during snowfalls have to do with breakdowns. If we have a truck breakdown, we get the call on why isn't our area done. Okay. And without being in direct contact with our mechanic all the time, I have no idea that our plows go down, because usually once they go down, it's the driver and the mechanic are doing everything to get that plow back up. But nobody sees that there's roads not getting done. So I know I've gotten several calls in the not yet this year, because we've had a pretty good relaxing. I don't want to say too relaxed, but the events really haven't been that difficult. Last year we had a handful. There was a couple where roads were completely missed. We had new drivers in areas when people were taking weekends off and stuff like that, that this would also help with, because then you could pull open their area and be like, okay, you missed this road, this east-west, this, and we don't really have that ability right now without getting out and driving around.
Sure. So I'm looking at any additional soft savings, as in calls to the department and so forth, if there is additional benefit along those lines, would it be anything considerable?
You're talking man hours of time?
Yeah.
I mean, I would say most events I get some kind of calls. I know our planner dispatcher gets quite a few calls on every day, depending on snow or ice. Leaf calls, we get quite a few. More of the leaf calls that we get are, we saw your guys go past, you did our whole road, but you didn't pick up mine. This would also give us the ability to say, yes, we were there, we were picking up leaves at this time, there was nothing there. I mean, so those kind of, I don't want to call them headache calls, but those calls after the fact are the ones that I think it would help us eliminate or shorten.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Alderman Busker.
Yeah, a couple questions I have. With this software, would there be, you talked about it being a kind of a distraction for the driver to have a tablet in there, but would it have the capability to, if we were to get tablets for the drivers, I don't know if we'd be able to deactivate them while they're in the drive mode, but for the drivers to update, like in a discussion panel, if they see something on the road, like a vehicle, they can note it, and then it sends a link to the sheriff's department or police department that there's vehicles blocking, or if there is a breakdown, they can put it in the notes that the truck's broke down, so you can pull up the screen and see the live action that, okay, that's why it's not getting plowed, the truck's broke down at this location. Does it have any of that capabilities with it?
I'm not sure. I don't know if it has any.
I don't remember seeing it go that far to put a lot of notes in it. It was mostly the location, speed, and stuff like that.
Thank you.
Director Carr. 2 questions. In getting this GPS tracking, would this make it more efficient? Or would it make it more efficient, and have we had problems of any type in the past?
Without seeing a problem, you don't know there's a problem. I don't want to say that shining a light on things brings to the surface a lot of things that might have been going on. I think that tracking ability will keep people diligent with their work. I feel like there's always that, if you know that somebody has eyes on you, you're going to be doing your job to the best of your ability. I think there's some of that could come to play in it. At the same time, tracking your movements and looking back at how you plowed your route and how other people plowed their route, it may identify that you didn't take the most effective route or most efficient route. I mean, there's always that. It could be turned into a learning tool on how you're doing your route and how the person before you did your route.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Alderman Bradshaw.
Thank you. Manager Crowe, I see that this does have the strategic plan alignment that we'd asked for, making it connected, accessible, and safe community, greater assurance that all the streets are being plowed and salted, responsive, efficient government, and more efficient use of the salt reserves, hopefully to cover the costs. I say hopefully because you haven't proven to us yet that it will cover the costs. And I was reading further about the hardware for the project, $13,149. The software is a soft cost of $3,024, and the annual cellular connection cost also will be an annual of approximately $1,488. And I'm assuming with all these charges and outfitting the vehicles that's why you thought it wouldn't pay for itself with the prospective savings of the 10% of the salt for 2 years, correct? That's if we have that savings.
A lot of it would hinge on those electronic salt spreaders, and where I got the 10% was a little bit anecdotally speaking with public works director out of Iowa. But one of the early numbers, I probably shouldn't even say this number, but a vendor said 30%, which I thought was ridiculous when I heard it. So speaking with another, somebody who has the system, they felt like 10% was pretty well in line.
And may I continue?
Yes, Alderman
Thank you.
Bradshaw.
Well, I see it's marked where the support of this project and the line items that would be paid out of, like the hardware would be paid out of the MIS hardware line item. Now, has all of this been budgeted in those line items so far?
Yes, they have.
So at this time, we would not have any problems coming up with paying for this plan, and then obviously we're hoping in the years to come we'll have the money there to cover the costs of the program. Is that what we're assuming with the way you have it detailed?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. I think it sounds like a great plan. I'm not sure about the cost savings. None of us are always exactly sure, but it does sound a lot more plausible after you told us how they overemphasized what the savings would be, and what you, after you spoke to someone else who's been through this, what the savings might hopefully actually be. So I'm in support of this. I would like to make a motion to move this forward to the next regularly scheduled council meeting.
Second. Okay, I have a motion made by Alderman Bradshaw, second by Alderman Parker to move this to the next scheduled council meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay. The next is the discussion of the police department restructuring with Chief Summers.
Thank you. I think everybody is aware that part of the strategic plan was to find a way to restructure some of the supervisory positions within the police department. The current structure that we have right now is the chief, deputy chief. We have positions for 3 lieutenants, 5 sergeants, and 5 corporals. The organizational chart's a little small, but underneath the deputy chief, we have the administrative lieutenant, and I'll get into some of these specific things that these officers do here in a second. The operations lieutenant, who is in charge of patrol, and with 7 available spots on each shift for the patrol officers that are actually out there on the street. The Detective Bureau also has a significant number of officers that fall underneath the Detective Bureau. The deputy chief currently executes the budget. He pays the bills, makes sure everything, all the finances is going the way it needs to be. He's also the public information officer. He manages the training function of the department. He's the keeper of records. He maintains all the personnel files, and he acts as a chief that should be when the chief is absent. The administrative lieutenant is tasked with managing the 911 center and coordinating with the 911 board. He also manages the sustained traffic enforcement and other safety grant programs that we have at the police department. So the sustained traffic enforcement is the holiday enforcement traffic that you have around the holidays. It's grant reimbursed by the state. So around Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's, he manages all of those safety programs. He also conducts policy updates for the police department. He manages a sex offender program, and he's a fleet maintenance officer. So he takes care of all the squad maintenance, and that's almost a full-time job in itself. Our operations lieutenant manages the everyday operation of the patrol division. He manages the internal investigation and complaint function of the department. He manages the response to resistance and aggression program. That's a big, long term for what that is he manages how we control our control tactics and the tactics we use on the street. It used to be called the use of force program, if that sounds a little better. So anytime we have to arrest somebody and what has to go above us just putting handcuffs on a normal person, that falls into the response to resistance and aggression program. The operations lieutenant also manages the specialized unit, the gang unit, the SRO, the K-9 units, and our auxiliary units. The detective lieutenant, he manages all the investigations of crimes that are reported to the department. He manages special investigation units, the State Line Area Narcotics Teams officers, the FBI task force. He's also a liaison between the state's attorney's office and the police department. When the state's attorney's office needs something, they call Lieutenant Schroeder and advise him what he needs, and he figures out how to get that information to the state's attorney's office. He also manages the evidence function of the police department. He is the head of all of the evidence that we maintain at the police department. That falls underneath the detective lieutenant. And he also manages our asset forfeiture program. These are just a few of the things that these officers do on a daily basis. The proposed changes that I'm proposing is the creation of an Office of Professional Standards. And what would fall underneath that office is he would manage the Lexipol system. And I'll get into the Lexipol system in a little more detail. He would manage the internal investigation function of the police department, manage the accreditation program, and that's a second topic that I'll touch on a little more. He'll manage the training function, develop and manage the recruitment program, and manage the response to resistance and aggression program. The things that are important to touch on here, the internal investigation function of the police department is a critical aspect of our department. It's just not to go out and find officers that are doing things wrong, but when a complaint comes in, it's to protect the reputation of the police department as well. So we need to have qualified people that can go out and look at these complaints and determine if an officer had done something wrong, and if he did do something wrong, what do we need to do to correct that? How do we need to retrain that person? But it also needs to look at the things that the officers did right. And if they were right when they were in the performance of their duties, then they need to be able to say that and notify the personnel, the personnel and the complainant that the officer did things right. And that's 90% of the times that our officers are going on. It's probably higher than 90% of the times. But that is a critical, important part of our police department, is to have a quality internal investigation function at the police department. What is Lexipol? We've touched on it before. Lexipol is they provide state-specific policies that are vetted by law enforcement professionals and public safety attorneys. They go out and look at what are the best practices not only in the state, but in the country. They provide policy updates in response to legislation cases, case law, and evolving best practices. So an example with the new legislation of the marijuana laws, they would already be ahead of that game, looking at what we need to do in our policy and make recommendations that they would highly recommend that we change before we even have time to think about it. If there's a case decision that will affect the way we police in our area, they will be on top of that and be able to notify us, hey, in your use of force program, you say this, we have a case law that has changed, you should really think about changing your wording in here to mirror what the case law says. So they're out in front of us on that. They also provide daily scenario-based training for our officers. So every time they log into the computer, after the system's up and running, it'll give them a short quiz on what our policies are. It'll give us a short quiz of a pursuit. What would you do? Would this be acceptable? A use of force. It could go all the way down to just how are you going to handle a domestic incident. So this is a really important tool that we need to get going into the police department. And not only that, it'll manage it'll track when officers sign off on policies. So an officer can't say, hey, you know what, I didn't know about that, because there's going to be documentation that they read it, they passed a quiz on it, and there's be an electronic format of they knew what to do, when to do it. Accreditation is something else that's very important to me and to the department, and it kind of goes hand in hand with Lexipol. Accreditation comes, I'm not going to read this whole thing because I'm terrible reading while I'm standing up and talking, but accreditation is simply, the Illinois Chiefs has a program that you can apply to and go through, and what they do is they examine all of your policies and what are the best practices of the state. What are other agencies doing in the state? And it's just not to supply the policies to them for review. They will send an evaluator to come out to the department to look at your department to make sure that you're doing those things that are best practices here in Illinois and what other departments our size and in our area are doing as well, and what they think is the best practice. And again, it's important for us to share those policies and have somebody else tell us what we can and cannot do and what we need to do different or what we are doing good. So that's a very important part. And that's a lot of work that's going to go into that program. There's two different levels that you can go, a 48 or a 60-point evaluation by an evaluator that would come in and look at all those points at the police department to make sure that we're doing those things right. And when they see that we are doing those things right, then you'll receive your accreditation, and we can move to the next level of a possible national accreditation also. What other changes are we going to make? We are going to replace one supervisory position in the Special Victims Unit with an employee of the rank of patrolman. We are going to promote the corporal to the sergeant in the Detective Bureau. So Corporal Stovall, who is currently in the Special Victims Unit, would be promoted to the sergeant in the Detective Bureau, where she would oversee both the Juvenile Bureau as well as the Special Victims Unit. So she will be still very hands-on to that Special Victims Unit. It's my opinion that the person in the Special Victims Unit now does not need to have the rank, a supervisory rank. Traditionally, the corporal is the introductory supervisory position where they're learning out how to manage people, how to supervise people, and usually the most of that takes place on the street. When you're in a one position or a one-person department, there's not really a need for a supervisor in that department. That would be the elimination of that one supervisory position from the department. So we would be going from 5 corporals down to 4 corporals. All the corporals would be assigned to the patrol division on the shifts. Other administrative lieutenant duties will be dispersed among the administrative staff. So in essence, the sergeant would be promoted to the position of the Office of Professional Standards at that of a lieutenant rank. This is important because if he has to do internal investigations, it's hard to have a sergeant investigate somebody of equal rank or even above them to go there. So in my opinion, it needs to have somebody with a pretty high rank in the department that can look at all the officers across the board. The new supervisory structure would look like this. There'd be a chief, a deputy chief, 3 lieutenants, 5 sergeants, and 4 corporals. And again, we are not changing very much of the organizational structure. We're going to make some movements around there. Each shift will still have 7, each patrol shift of the people that you see out in the streets on the squads will still have 7 people per shift, is the goal my goal, which is what it currently is now. In essence, 2 years ago, we moved one person out of the gang unit, and she moved into the street crimes, or the Special Victims Unit. We have operated with 2 people in the gang unit, and it's operated wonderfully and have been very effective with 2 people in that. In essence, we are not going to be replacing that 3rd person in the gang unit. Instead, we are going to take that 3rd person that would be in the gang unit, put them in the special victims unit. And we would, in essence, we would be losing 1 position at the police department, going from 48 sworn officers to 47 sworn officers. In my opinion, I think this is going to make us a more efficient department, and there would be a potential cost savings of nearly $72,000 as it relates to our budget currently. And I guess the one last thing that I do want to say, I think it's important to know that as we change our policies and work on best practices, one of the things that I've heard a lot is our insurance rates. And I'm quite certain that getting the accreditation, having the Lexipol, having our officers understand these things is going to drive some of our insurance costs down, because we're going to be doing things at a different standard and a different level, and that's going to be required of us.
Okay, do we have any discussion from the council at this time?
Chair.
Alderman Boardman.
Chief, the Lexipol, that's currently not a service we're utilizing at the police department?
It is a service that we're working on. There's been some hiccups in it as we go on with the union negotiations going on. There's some things in there that we may have to bargain in there to make that, so we've kind of stepped back and had the priority be the contract of the things that we want to get.
We tried to bring Lexipol on, 18 months ago?
Correct.
And it's actually partially paid for by our insurance company. But as Chief said, there were some hiccups. The union made a point of bargaining, so we said, we'll pull it off the table till the contract's signed. Once the contract is signed, we'll bring in Lexipol on into the department. So they are currently reviewing all the Lexipol policies, but they wanted to incorporate the Lexipol into the contract.
Okay, and then just a follow-up.
Yes, Alderman Boardman.
With regards to Corporal Stovall, you're talking about her being moved to a sergeant position who would oversee the SVU and the juvenile department?
Correct, as well as handle other issues and investigations within the department, the detective bureau as a whole.
She would be the detective sergeant of all investigations?
Correct, but her main priority would be the juvenile bureau and the special victims unit.
And then the SVU, her position will be replaced by somebody from patrol who would now become an additional detective?
Correct.
Thanks, that's all I have.
Oh, Alderman Parker.
I really am impressed with the amount of work that you put in, and Lowell, and once it's settled.
I'll give all the credit to Matt for that one.
Great work, Matt. But when it's done, once it's all finalized, I'd like to get a copy of the structure. Appreciate it, but looks like you did a lot of effort and work in there, and I like the way it looks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief Summers.
Yes, sir.
I gotta understand we're gonna lose, should we say lose one man off the street?
Correct.
But have we looked into maybe another canine in replace of the officer? Because he speaks a little louder than people do.
We currently have 2 K-9 officers, one assigned to each rotation. So we kind of have both rotations covered, so I didn't put much thought into that.
Okay, thank you, though. But I mean, I thought, when I said we lose, because I'm in favor of all the manpower we can get out there, because that's what we need, especially at any time and or the summer months.
I agree, and I hate to, when I look at things, and 20 years ago, and if I would have said, hey, we're going to sacrifice a guy for something different, I would have been questioning myself at the time. But when I look at the efficiency that we can come in the things that we're doing now, and we're not really, on paper, we're losing a person, but we haven't had that person there in over 2 years in the gang unit.
And with these savings, would that go back into the department? The savings that we will be saving? Would they be initiated back into the police department?
That's something I'd have to talk about with the manager and Mr. Bucus.
Well, I mean, I would hate to see it just, be sitting out there and not being used. Thank you.
Chair.
Alderman McClanahan.
I guess my overall thoughts are on, thank you for your work and review in regards to this. And from a 30,000 foot level, I don't think any of us want to be in a position where we're saying, well, you need A, B, C, and X, Y, and Z. It's like, we've got obviously the city manager in his position, and we've got you in your position here in regards to that, and we asked you to go ahead and do a review. You did a review. You came back to us with a structure that you said, if I heard you correctly, is not going to change the amount of people that we have on the street per shift. The gang unit's going to continue to operate the way that the gang unit has been effectively operating.
Correct.
And I say effectively in both terms of it, and how it's been, and also I think it's an effective unit. The SVU unit's going to still be able to operate. It's just going to be with a patrol person. You're going to have the shifts in the upper levels that you discussed on that. So at the end of the day, you're also adding an emphasis on increased training, increased accreditation, increased professionalism of the department. So as long as you can accomplish all those things, I think the savings are a tangential benefit to it. But if this is what you believe will lead to a more efficient, responsive, professional department, then I'll support it.
Is that a motion?
Yeah. Alderman Parker.
I'm sure it's simple. I just can't see it. Where are we losing a person? Because the way you went through the structure, it's like we have the same amount of people in each organization there. So where is this person coming from?
Back to the original organizational chart, the gang unit, I can't see it. The gang unit originally had 3 people, and 2 years ago, Corporal Stovall was supervising that gang unit. She moved to the Special Victims Unit, so they've been operating with the 2 officers in there since that time. So in the new organizational chart, it's the gang unit is just the 2 people in there.
I knew there was a simple answer. Yeah, I just didn't see it. Another question?
Yes, Alderman
Are
Parker.
both of our canines up operational now and functional?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, they are, but Matt and I have talked about looking at changing out one of the canines we're looking at a different, with the change in cannabis, getting a new canine trained up, because one of the canines is getting older.
Okay.
And to replace them with one
would leave and one would come replace
Yeah.
them. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Alderman Bradshaw.
Thank you. Chief, I was reading through your Lexipol, and I'm really excited about this additional training, but I'm assuming there will be a cost associated with this. Is that true?
There is a cost. Like the city manager said, the insurance company covered part of it. We are going to cover part of it out of our drug fund and our DUI fund, which all comes from fines from the court.
Sounds great.
I have a quick question.
Alderman Bordeman.
With regards to our tobacco, tobacco and alcohol ordinances that are going to require surveillance footage. Right now, the police department is tasked with almost enforcing that, or do you feel like that's a good use of the police department's resources, or do you think that would be better fitted for code enforcement?
I think it's a combination of 2 things. I think some of the video footage that comes from there is very, very important. So we do need to keep our foot in that door. The nuisance inspectors may not know exactly what we're looking for and things like that. So we want to make sure on some of those things that we still have our foot in the door and some say in what goes on there.
And it's actually the deputy chief that goes out and does it, and there's been a discussion, Steve's, and I've had some discussions as to what, because we've actually had some issues recently on the tobacco and vape licenses that and it's been, from a city manager's perspective, the deputy chief walks through your door and hands you a letter and says you're going to lose your license, and it's much bigger impact. Every person that the deputy chief has handed the letter to has come in the next day and paid off their.
Okay, thanks.
Alderman Bradshaw.
I would like to make a motion to move this forward to the next regularly scheduled council meeting.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion made by Alderman Bradshaw, second by Alderman Parker to move the amending ordinance to the next scheduled council meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Well, let's see who's next. Okay. Our last discussion tonight is going to be in reference to the Festival District Ordinance and the Wine and Walk Ordinance. Attorney Steve Cox.
Council, good evening. Well, what you have in front of you are two separate ordinances. The first one I'll address is the Wine Walk Ordinance, which is dealt with through a new T5 temporary license. I think one thing that's important to note before I get started on both of these ordinances is neither of them does anything that we can't already do through our special event licensing powers through the Liquor Commission. What both of these ordinances are intended to do is create a template for these types of things so that if they're rolled out in a way which is predictable, organized, and easy to understand for people who want to maybe put on one of these events such as the Wine Walk. So the T5 license, without going into the details, I'm happy to discuss details if anybody has questions, but ultimately what it does is it creates a mechanism whereby someone can come in, a business sponsor, in conjunction with a liquor sponsor, and say, we want to have a wine tasting walk, and that's going to be hosted at various businesses within the downtown business district. This is specific to the downtown business district. So the example would be the wine walks we've had previously, and I know that currently there's in the works the Arctic Ale Walk. That was handled a little bit differently last year just because we didn't have this ordinance in place. But where someone would go, conceivably get a ticket at the outset and go from business to business and be served a tasting of a wine or a beer at that location by either a tasting representative from one of the manufacturers. I think that's what most of us are used to from a tasting presentation, or by the liquor sponsor themselves, but subject to the same regulations. So that's, in a nutshell, what that does. And again, I'm happy to answer any additional questions or go into more specifics if you would like. We had at Liquor Commission, I was pulled into discussing the reason for the methodology of this, and it has to do with the way that the ordinance is laid out has to do with the way that the state regulates things versus the way we regulate things. So there's some necessary structure that's placed here just to make sure that our sponsors aren't crossing a line in doing something they shouldn't be doing accidentally.
One of the things I'll add is this wine walk ordinance was something that was asked for us by the Downtown Business Association and the Greater Freeport Partnership. Because what it does is if they have a 501c3 sponsor under this and under this ordinance, they do not have to have Bassett-trained individuals pouring under the state if we have this ordinance in place.
That is correct.
Yeah, Alderman
Thank you.
McMillan.
The only issue that I had with the structure on this one was actually the last paragraph, F5. It said the Liquor Commission shall be authorized to promulgate fees, rules, and regulations implementing this section. I liked how you set a lot of the things out, and I think most of it is put in place here. But I do think that those issues, generally speaking, fees, rules, and regulations, should be brought forward as recommendations to the council. Council approves it, and then the Liquor Commission can implement it. So that's the only thing I've got with this one is that, and you're most of the way there. This one lays out a lot of those issues. Doesn't talk about fees, I don't think, but that's my main concern on that one.
Yeah, so understood. And I think we have, as a city, when we redid the liquor code, We have tried to keep everything in the code so that we don't have any of these arcane regulations that nobody knows where to find or whatever. They look them up on AmLegal and they're just there. So I think that would probably be in keeping with what the council has done previously. So certainly, I think striking that. The one thing there would need to be a fee structure set up for the license in the ordinance, which I'm sure we can get figured out.
Sure. Alderman Burberry.
Thank you. Attorney Cox, you said this is specific to downtown,
It is.
but it's also a template.
I'm sorry?
It's also a template in a way that it could be done other places. I mean, if Wendy's wanted to have walk-around wine when they have their car show, or if the car dealers on South Street all wanted to get together and do something, would that be possible for another part of the community to apply the template?
The one thing is, this does not allow for walking out in the open with wine. It has to be consumed in the location in which the wine and beer has to be consumed.
Indoors,
Indoors at the location.
but not on private property.
Well, it could also be a tent. The question was that we got was a tent if it's designated. Somebody that is there is regulated as a designated spot.
Okay. All right.
So when you're talking about out in the Wendy's area, I mean, you can't transit through the town with.
No, but if they limited it to their particular property or to the showrooms of car dealers.
So what that would be is a T2. So that would be a single property T2.
Okay, all right.
To explain the walk ordinance, what we're doing here, the local municipality has the ability to declare either through its licensing authority generally, and licensing its licensees, or through special event permits, is we're talking about here, to designate particular areas as licensed premises. And that's a buzzword that just keeps coming back through the Liquor Control Act. So what we're doing with this ordinance is we're allowing a petitioner to ask that the Liquor Commission essentially paint those premises green on a map. So there's a green dot here, a green dot here, a green dot here, and those become licensed premises during the hours. So people can be served alcohol and consume on those licensed premises. Now, that doesn't authorize public carry. That's something that we get to with the festival ordinance. But this would just be in those ordinances, or in those establishments. But if you're outside of the downtown business district, of course, you can still come in and get a T2. Or a T1 if you're not for profit. So Wendy's, if during their car show, could certainly come in and apply, and they would need to have someone serve as a liquor sponsor because they're not a licensee, but someone can bring it in, and if the commission would approve that, they could have that event.
Attorney Cox, are there any major restrictions or anything like that, shall we say?
No. What we tried to do, Alderman Ross, is we tried to create a path for someone who wants to sponsor a wine walk, particularly, or we called it a tasting walk because it could be a wine or a beer walk, that they can look at the ordinance and understand what they need to do in order to do this successfully and coloring within the lines as far as the state goes, because again, they have to go, it's not just us that licenses them. Anybody who wants to serve outside of a bar, effectively, has to go to the state and get a temporary license. And there are very particular restrictions on that. So what we've tried to do is map a way for them to ensure that everybody complies with what they need to comply with at the state level.
Okay.
So
basically, what I'm saying, like the Parkway, when they have when they're outside on the curb, would they be able to do that?
Not under this ordinance. Okay. This is a separate thing. That would go more to the festival ordinance, which is still a little bit different. But this is just typically a one-day event And it's, again, to be held specifically at businesses. This would not be, if you happen to have a home in the downtown business district, you couldn't host a tasting in your home or, so again, it needs to be a retail or a service business downtown.
So one of the things that this ordinance came about was, so the Arctic Ale Walk that we did last year, that they were struggling with how to license that and how to move it forward. So the Greater Freeport Partnership went out and looked at ordinances that were being used in other states. So what Steve and I did was looked at internal to the state and said, what are other communities doing? And we found that this was an ordinance that we found that Champaign was doing, and we talked to them as we went forward. Debbie talked to them as well, and so we said this can meet the requirements. And then once, because they struggle every year with the wine walk and the wine festival and the Arctic Ale Walk as how to go about it. So this gives them a very clear guidelines on how to do that.
Chair?
Yes, Alderman Gorderman.
I'm sure that, I have two questions. So one, the downtown business district is much larger than the downtown festival district, correct?
Not much larger. So the central business district, I think you all got a map, and I'll jump forward on the festival ordinance. If you extend that about 2 blocks west, so the central business district actually transits Galena, which we didn't think was a good idea with the festival district because you've got foot traffic there. So it'll go west 2 blocks, and then I think maybe north 1 more block as well. But other than that, the central business, so the central business district effectively tracks that festival ordinance map, just a couple more blocks around the perimeter.
And is that gonna, the liquor commission, they haven't heard any objections from businesses that are on the outskirts of that saying we should be included in this? That hasn't been a problem?
No, and as a matter of fact, the last liquor commission meeting, I believe invitations went out to licensees in the affected area. And we had a couple of attendees, but for the most part.
So the festival ordinance requires that the alcohol be served either from a bar or a restaurant as we go out. Somebody that already has a liquor and allows them to transit within the area. Now, I know that Matt has some concerns because he's expressed those to me with this. And so about the festival ordinance. And so what's going to happen with the festival ordinance is you're seeing each bar, restaurant will have a separate cup. And you can see where the cup, and the wristbands, they will provide a wristband. So anybody that serves alcohol still has to be Bassett trained. The wristbands will be provided by the city, so we can have 8 different colors that can go over the 8 weekends of each month. That's the way the ordinance is written. Now, I'll let Matt express his concerns.
Before we get, I just had one more on the wine walk ordinance. The 2, you can do it twice a year. That number came from where, and the liquor commission was okay with that? The GFP was okay with that limited amount?
That was, I believe, probably straight from Champaign. The idea is that a single sponsor can't do it every week, I think. I think having a limitation, if somebody else wanted to do it and GFP wanted to serve as the liquor sponsor, they could potentially do that. But ultimately, I think the idea is just to prevent, again, somebody deciding to co-opt the whole thing and do it every weekend.
So the GFP, as a 501c3, can only sponsor then 2 events. And so they can have 2 where why a 501c3 is key is they don't have to have their individuals Bassett. Not everybody is a pours of Bassett trained, but if a wine, say somebody that wants to do a tasting throughout and do multiple facilities where it's sponsored by a vineyard or a brewery, they then have to have, each person has to be Bassett trained if it's a at that point, wherever they're pouring.
Okay, and sorry, one last follow-up.
Go ahead, Alderman.
So the sponsor can do it twice, but a business could opt in to more than two throughout the year? Like the host site could opt into every single one as long as they're not the sponsor?
Absolutely.
Oh, all
Yes.
right. Thanks, that answers my question.
Chair?
Yes, Alderman.
So are we going to the downtown festival district now for discussion then? Is that, all right. Well, start us off with the objections and then let's go from there.
Well, the concerns that I do have is, it will be very hard for the police department to police people that aren't going about it the correct way. If someone could pull their car up, park it down there and refill their own cup, it'd be very difficult for us to know, did they buy it inside a store, or even if they walked outside the boundaries, filled their cup up and made it back inside. Over-serving, self-serving, on what they have going on there is a big concern of mine. And it's always fun while the event is going on, but once it's over, you know, we're not a community the size of some other ones that I've heard this is, have taken the same things, but the cleanup after, you know, what goes on during the event, so there's things left, bodily fluids left out and about that's gonna fall back to somebody else to have to clean up. Another concern that I do have is that historically, you know, 4 or 5 blocks away, we've battled with open alcohol, open containers in the street, and now we're opening up downtown to that same thing, and it's going to create more of a battle 4 or 5 blocks away on what we're enforcing there. How come you're enforcing it here and not enforcing it downtown? Those are just a few of the concerns that I have.
Chair?
Yes, Alderman Borneman.
Do you see these, so we do Music on Chicago 3 times, 4 times in the summer. How would that compare to what your issues you face there compared to what you anticipate facing with this ordinance?
I think that area is smaller. There's restrooms. It's easier policed inside that area. We can tell what's coming in, what's going out, as opposed to a larger area where cars can be in different spots. And that's, it's just when you have it there and you barricaded it off, and it's easy for us to see what's happening. It's a lot easier.
Chair?
Yes, Alderman McClatchy.
Thank you. What was intended to really be covered under this? I mean, because yeah, you say you got Music on Chicago and kind of like a one, two block area, Brewfest, and again, a limited area. And then the festival district is a significantly larger area. What is the type of event? I get and again, just so I say, I get the wine walk thing and what you guys are looking to do on that, but what are we really trying to accomplish with this district?
Well, I think the directive from the Liquor Commission, I think the idea would be this would be a Friday and Saturday evening thing. I think it was Memorial Day to Labor Day was
That's right.
what was
That's
proposed.
That's what they specified.
So this would not be a single event. This would be a recurring a recurring thing.
Follow-up, Chair? Like what kind of, what are we, okay, so like, let's say one of those weekends. Talk to me like one of these events, what do one of these events look like? Or a series of events looks like,
right,
the weekend.
Right, that I don't know. What we tried to do is address the, let me back up. So from a patron's standpoint, what you would do if you were going to participate in that is you would drive downtown, park somewhere, and then you would go into an establishment somewhere. You would go into that establishment, you would buy a drink, you would get a cup that would have that establishment's name on it so that you knew where that came from, and you get a wristband if you didn't already have one. So you'd be issued one. You can't be outdoors, and this goes to some of Chief's concerns. You can't be outdoors with open liquor unless you've got a wristband. And if you've got a wristband, you've been age checked by a Bassett-trained server within one of the licensees. So then you can walk outside, which you can't now. It's, open alcohol is restricted. It's not restricted by the Liquor Control Act, by the way. The state doesn't regulate that. That's all at the local level. That's local control. So what we're saying is we're lifting that control for this region during specified times, but only if you've got your cup with an identified licensee's name on it and you've got your wristband. So you would be able to wander around, go see if there's music playing somewhere. You could go see that. You could sit on a bench. It's outside.
So other communities do this in a little bit different way, but they do it, like, I'll use Galesburg because I'm familiar with them. They do First Fridays. So the first Friday of every month during the summer, they do it. The difference is, and when we originally proposed this, was they block the streets, and and you stay within the streets that are secured down, that are designated, and that gives the police a little bit more ability to control the access in and out. You also can't move cars back there. Champaign has they activate the district at the request. The Liquor Commission can activate it. They designate the liquor area via signs. I don't think they put barriers up.
I don't believe so.
No, but they designate it, but they have to get a request in to designate. They don't designate it on every Friday and Saturday. It's when it's requested of the Liquor Commissioner, and there it's left up to the commissioner, and it's not left up to the commission to activate it. And there are other municipalities that do versions between those two.
Chair?
Alderman,
Go ahead.
oh,
Go ahead.
yeah, Attorney Cox. Okay, any ordinance that the state, like Manager Groh say, that it set any boundaries. So when they get that ban, they're advised that you can only stay within this boundary, or else if you're found with outside this boundary, you will be fined.
Yes, that would be the case, and I think you would probably be issued perhaps with your wristband, maybe a little map showing the streets. Not really sure how that would be rolled out. I think the Liquor Commission and the Liquor Commissioner would need to figure out the very specifics of that. But that's correct, because the restriction on the local prohibition on open alcohol in public places would be lifted just for that time period within a very specified boundary. So if you step out of that, now you're subject to our standard ordinances.
Correct. But there's nothing in this ordinance stating that, correct?
Yes.
Oh, there is?
Yep. So it specifically calls out, there's a perimeter that's actually laid out, and again, that's in legalese, but the map, if you look at it, draws out that boundary, and it talks about which side of the street it follows. So there would need to be a way to convey that to the participants. We'd have to figure out the mechanics of that. Whether that be signage or handing out a map, or how that's handled.
Okay, sounds like a good idea.
Chair?
Yes, Alderman McClanahan.
When we've done other changes in the past, and obviously, again, using Chicago Brew Fest, what's proposed for the wine, the tasting walk, when we did parklets and all those things of that nature, there was kind of some sort of demand for this type of thing that led to this. Do we have any demand for something like this? Are we hearing something in regards to it? What's the push for?
The GFP approached us as a way to bring traffic down into the downtown, and my discussion with them was, it would be nice if we did this and then convince the businesses to stay open. The only businesses that are open right now on Saturday afternoon, and what they've seen is the benefit. So on Saturday morning, when we have the farmers market down there, we have seen foot traffic grow exponentially, and we have seen good feedback. And so their idea is that this will do the same thing. but most of our businesses right now are closing at 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoons.
Chair,
Alderman Varsha, yes.
thank you. I kind of siding on the chief's side with this, that I'm wondering if it's going to be easy to control. I think of Monroe, Wisconsin as a nice example of being able to stay within the square area, but there again, it's roped, it's sanctioned off. You can't leave that area, you can't drive in that area. The police can see the parameter and mind that parameter, even though it's a large area. But in Freeport, I don't know how they would do that with the downtown apartments and the cars, and other than Music on Chicago, which is a small area. Are people that desperate to drink alcohol and wander the streets? I mean, that's what I want to know. Is there really going to be a call for this in Freeport?
Chair.
Yes, Alderman. Yes.
I guess what I'd say on my perspective is I've got a couple of concerns. I mean, if we're gonna review this further, there's a couple things that, from my perspective, not to speak for everybody else, I'd like to see. One is the same thing I had with the wine tasting of the where's the authority. It's got the Liquor Commission shall have the exclusive authority to promulgate rules, fees, and regulations implementing this section. Not a fan of that. I think we need to have ownership in regards to it. Otherwise, if there's some issues and someone says, well, how did this come about? You can say, well, we gave the authority to some unelected representatives. And I don't think that would go over well at all. So if we're gonna review this further down the road, I'd wanna see that addressed, the issues brought up by the chief addressed, at a minimum. And then obviously more structured placement of this. But again, on the wine one, I think you guys can accomplish that pretty quickly, just changing that one section, adding a few more things in there. That's just my perspective.
Okay.
Alderman Burberry.
Again, thinking about the role of the police and their job, I assume that an organization that wants to do this, GFP or somebody's gonna put together a proposal, go to the Liquor Commission and move it through, or not?
That's kind of what you're looking at, I
Okay,
think.
because what I'm thinking then is if that is the case, and every event might be different, could the police department have a review authority, a situation to take a look at this? Because everyone's gonna be different, and let them come up with, without restrictions or necessarily, but to at least know what's happening before it happens.
So right now, the proposal from the Liquor Commission is every Friday and Saturday without specification to having any event between Memorial Day and Labor Day.
Say that again now?
What the Liquor Commission wants is, what they have proposed to you is every Friday and Saturday between Memorial Day and Labor Day is to have this in effect. And that changed during the Liquor Commission meeting. What we had made a proposal is, let's try this like the first Fridays and see how it goes.
And that's gonna, the manpower at the police then would go up then, correct? Chief Summers?
Dedicated man.
I don't believe so.
No, I mean, it would take manpower to police this event.
It would draw officers from other areas of the town to that district to maintain security there.
Right, to maintain the security, correct.
Chair, would it be possible, I think this sounds like a fun idea, but there's a lot of issues. One thing is, this seems to be like kind of the Greater Freeport Partnership's baby, if I'm wrong here, that they're the ones who came forward with this idea. Would it be possible to get somebody from there to present what this is going to look like to us, other than, I know, Attorney Cox, you're presenting an ordinance to us. This wasn't your idea. I think it'd be helpful if we could have some.
And I'll back Steve up on this. This was not what we had originally had proposed on this, so.
Yeah, that's why I think it'd be, helpful for everybody to kind of see what we're agreeing to. But overall, when I think of a festival, I think of an area where cars aren't driving through and people are running around with drinks. I mean, that's just a public safety thing, and that, to me, needs to be better defined or restricted, because if you have cars, just like Music on Chicago, obviously it's one block, And I could see this expanding more, but with just people driving through, and also, I guess this would be okay. I'll end my dissertation here with one final question. This would just allow people to leave a bar and to gather on a street corner and just drink their alcohol, right? They don't have to stay in motion. Like you say, they go from one place to another. They could just stand there and set up shop in a corner.
Sure.
Can I throw in something here? I think there's a little bit of confusion with the word festival and thinking it's an event, because that's not what it is. If I could just sum it up, from what I see, the Greater Freeport Partnership's perspective on tourism would be, let's say there's somebody coming in from out of town, and they're sitting at, this is it, eatery, and they have a glass of wine, and they want to walk over to Pub 219, and well, there's lots of stores in between those two areas, and they would like to encourage that people can go into other stores. It's a tourism draw is what they're trying to create. So then if it were every Friday and every Saturday for, 4 or 5 months, see how it works, make changes as needed if it doesn't work. It's not about sitting on the corner and watching traffic and having a drink outside. That wasn't their intent.
Chair,
Alderman McKellar.
I appreciate not the intent, but unless it's strictly defined, what's permissive is permissive, and it's, as we've seen with other things, it's very hard to come back and put the genie back in the bottle. It's a lot easier to start off restrictive and then say, okay, well, let's change this a little bit more. I'd move to, Chair, I got a question, council, for council in regards to this. I suppose we can move it on for a couple cows down the road, or if I move to table this indefinitely, when we have more of a structure and things laid out, that there's nothing prohibiting it from coming back just because it's been moved to be tabled indefinitely, is there?
Well, typically, the rule of thumb is always if you move to table indefinitely, that's the toll of death.
The kill.
That's how
Right.
you kill a motion there. If anything, you could direct staff to look into this and then bring it back, when they're ready, and not necessarily take a motion at this point.
And I would recommend have either Nicole Haas or Katie Getz, who were championing this, give a presentation what they want to move forward with this.
Well, we don't need to move it out of council, or out of COW then and now, so.
We can push it to the next COW.
I would make a motion to move it to the next cow with, yeah, that'd be my motion.
With everything else attached,
Yeah,
right?
with
Okay.
with a presentation from the individuals you mentioned. Are they from the partnership?
They are.
And then, so yeah. that'd be my motion.
And when you say that, do you mean for the festival district? Because I think there's a little more, do we need to have some things in place as far as the wine one, just because the Arctic Ale coming up?
I thought that was, my motion was specifically for the festival district.
I'd second that motion as it pertains to the festival district.
Okay, we have motion made by Alderman Borderman, second by Alderman McCandlecan, to amend the ordinance for the festival district. And
To the next
all those in favor? All those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed?
Mr. Chair? I did have one item just to bring up as we would review this once again, is just one thought to bring to the table and just some additional discussion on it, is looking at the, it looks like it's 5 blocks to the north and south, and additional 5 blocks to the east and west. With the concerns that Chief Summers brought up tonight, I'd like to consider a smaller subsection if we were to pursue something of this nature, and given the risks of patrolling that area. So just as the GFP would come back with a proposal, would just be to consider that if there is a smaller subsection.
One of the areas that they looked at this was they wanted to make sure all of the bars and restaurants in the downtown were included in this area. That's where the boundaries were set at. So
Okay.
that's where
I see.
this square was established.
Mr. Chair.
Alderman Busker.
Yeah, with the vote taken on the Festival District order, with the wine walk, did we make a motion to move that forward to the next meeting or anything?
No.
For more discussion?
Yes, do we have any more discussion on the wine walk?
Mr. Chair.
Alderman Bradshaw.
Alderman McClanathan had an excellent point as far as changing some of the legal verbiage with the wine tasting walk ordinance. And I would like to make a motion to move that forward to the next council meeting with those changes that Alderman McClanathan proposed.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion made by Alderman Bradshaw and second by Alderman Busker for the ordinance on the wine walk. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion moves forward.
Chair,
Good.
the legal verbiage, are you referring to the rules, fees, and regulations? That's
Yes,
to that.
more of those fleshed out
Thank you.
in count, yeah.
I took that as being F, specifically subsection F5.
Right, and then whatever changes you need to add to that to address the elimination of F5.
Understood.
Okay. At this time, do we have any public comments? Tommy?
Someone did that film, that thing about the police department,
You're welcome.
and you did a good job with it. And how are you gonna be on TV?
I don't know about that. We'll have to watch.
I wanna tell Jody Miller, you did a good job, I hope, I'm glad you're feeling better,
Well, thanks, Tammy, I appreciate it.
and wanna know about, you hear about the Kmart information? And part of Wick wanna know when they're gonna fix the potholes by Jefferson Street. People just praying about it, all the St. Vincent's.
Thank you, Tommy. Are there any more public comments? If not, there's a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Alderman Callaghan and seconded by Alderman Busker. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good night.